For the first time in quite a few years, we actually had snow in Buffalo on Christmas. Although, to be honest, this is the day after Christmas, but there was snow yesterday, just a lot less. Anyway, growing up in school, I was always known as the car guy, and the one brand I was synonymous with was Subaru. My first car was a 2007 Outback. I got it from a family friend, and it was exactly what I wanted. Fast forward, and a few years ago, I got this 2014 Impreza to replace that Outback. I've driven around 55,000 miles, and it's been all over New York, Vermont, and Ontario. And to be honest, it's not nearly the same as that Outback. I really liked that Outback. It was quirky. It was back when Subaru was unique and not mainstream. It was back when the Outback was actually a wagon. Today, the only thing that really sets Subaru apart is a boxer engine and standard symmetrical all-wheel drive in all their models. Snowy days like this, even if they're becoming more rare, are the reason people buy Subarus in the first place. On these days, Subaru bros come out, rip donuts around the parking lot while yelling the world is flat, because honestly, on a normal day, this car is pretty boring. But today is not a normal day. I get it. But today's not a normal day. It's a snow day. Because of that, it's a perfect day to review my Subaru.
The Impreza is one of Subaru's oldest cars. It's been around for decades. It really got popular thanks to the World Rally Championship, where Subaru has 3 constructors' titles to its name, as well as 3 drivers' titles, thanks to the likes of Colin McRae, Richard Burns, and Peter Solberg. Subaru pulled out of WRC in 2008, and honestly, ever since then, the cars have lacked that competitive nature that had them winning so much. The Impreza's last major redesign was in 2012, and the current generation carries those same principles over today. And in the ever-competing class of compact cars, even though it's on the sad decline, there's still plenty of great players in it, such as the Honda Civic, the Mazda 3, the Toyota Corolla, and the Hyundai Elantra. And all those cars have really stepped up the game lately, whereas Subaru has kind of just stayed stagnant. Although Subaru is a unique one in this class because they're ones that actually sell more hatchbacks than sedans. Not really common, especially in America. The model I have here is my 2014 Impreza Sport Premium 2.0i, 5-speed manual. The Sport and Sport Premium is really only a name. There's no extra power, there's no more tuned suspension, although it does have pretty cool grade wheels. And at least it offers a manual. Any car that says Sport in the name and doesn't offer a manual, well, they're just posers. But at the same time, this car has Sport in the name, and it is kind of a poser. Weirdly enough, it's actually 0.2 of an inch higher off the ground than the standard Impreza. But it's the volume seller, and it's the one I'm testing today.
Onto the styling. The front is kind of frumpy, with the grille angled backwards. Not really a huge fan of that. Got halogen headlamps because 2014. And you got fog lights in the sport models. I tinted mine yellow because rally, you know. Can at least pretend this car is still a WRC winning car. Coming around to the side, and this makes no attempt to hide the fact that it's a hatchback. The complete opposite of the Honda Civic. You can tell it's pretty squared off in the back with a bit of slope on the back glass. Roof. Roof rails come standard on the Sport model, and crossbars are an extra option. Roof rails come standard on the Sport model, and crossbars are an extra option. On the Sport model, you also have gray 17-inch alloy wheels, which I kind of like the look of. You don't really see many gray wheels out there. Same can be said about the door mirrors, though. While they are heated and do fold, they are obnoxiously large and overly square. I'd much prefer a more normal-looking rectangular door mirror. You also have this side skirt. I don't even know if it's a side skirt. I guess that's fake body kit or something. Don't really know what they were going for there, but it's really not necessary. Don't hate it, but don't really like it either. And you also have quite a large window in front of the front window, a low A-pillar window, which when I get to the inside, I'll show how great the visibility is in this car. Coming around to the back, there's really nothing special going on here, although I do like the look of it more than I do like the look of the front. The back glass has some slope to it, but it's not overly aggressive like a lot of new hatchbacks these days, and doesn't really impede on the cargo room. In fact, this can really be considered a wagon, and in some cases it is. especially using Torchinsky's 2 rules of a wagon, which include the fact that 1, there's a window dedicated in the cargo area, and 2, that the roof line covers at least 50% of the cargo bay. By those 2 respects, this is a wagon, and depending on what site you look at reviews for, some will consider it a hatchback, some will consider it a wagon. And the classic symmetrical all-wheel drive badging and the more annoying partial zero emissions vehicle badging. Why do they even put that on there? Why? Underneath the white snow, the color of this car is known as quartz blue pearl. It's a pretty low-key blue. I personally would prefer a brighter tone, but Subaru is offering colors on the cars, which is really all you can ask for these days. As for the size, well, it's a compact hatchback. It's pretty maneuverable, great for just getting around town. The wheelbase on this car is 104.1 inches long. The length is 174.8 inches long. The width is 68.5 inches wide, and the height is about 57.5 inches tall. Curb weight, you're looking at just under 3,000 pounds for the manual, 2,998 pounds. So, kudos to Subaru there. As for the engine, it's a boxer engine, just like every single other Subaru. There ever is, there ever will be, except for maybe like the 360. This means that the pistons pump horizontally as opposed to vertically. This allows the engine to sit lower in the engine bay, giving the car a lower center of gravity, at least in theory. I personally don't really notice the difference. However, this allows the engine to be mounted longitudinally, which helps simplify things when it comes to all-wheel drive. Something that isn't common at all in this class, as mostly everything else is mounted transversely. The figures for this engine will shock you. No, they won't. It's 148 horsepower at 6,200 RPM and 145 pound-feet of torque at 4,200 RPM. That means this car is slow. Fuel economy figures are 24 city, 33 highway, 27 combined for the manual, and 27 city, 35 highway, 30 combined for the automatic. I get about 27, 28 miles per gallon combined, and usually 31 to 32 miles per gallon on the highway. Bit few MPG less in the winter, which puts me pretty much in line with the EPA numbers. The reason for the lower efficiency in the manuals is because Subaru uses different all-wheel drive systems based on the type of transmission used. The manuals use an all-wheel drive system that has a constant 50-50 front-rear torque split, hooked up with a viscous coupling center differential. The automatics, on the other hand, use an all-wheel drive system with a 60-40 front-rear split that can send power front and rear, and uses a more electronic system. So that means the all-wheel drive system on the manual is much more mechanical, and personally I prefer it. You don't really have to wait for the power to really go to the wheels and need them most, because it's always split 50-50. If you want to know more details about Subaru's all-wheel drive systems, click up there to find the Engineering Explained video on this. Inside, the Impreza feels way bigger than it should be. Subaru always does a really good job at keeping the belt line low and keeping the windows large. This allows a large greenhouse inside the car and a real open feeling of airiness. It also really increases visibility. As for the materials, as you'd expect, there's a mix of hard and soft plastics, mostly hard. This is wet, but scratchy. This is hard. This is hard. This is a bit soft. This is a little soft. Hard. Leather wrap steering wheel, so that's soft. Hard, 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 hard. Not soft enough. Barely soft. That's another big issue with this car, is these armrests, both on the door and the console. Horribly hard. They do not relax your arms on a long drive. When you're holding the wheel like this, they're the exact opposite of what you want. And although these materials do feel cheap, they are sturdy, and I never have a concern that I'm going to end up breaking something. As for driving position, it's actually a really comfortable driving position. Like I said in previous videos, I prefer to be lower, and this car is no exception. I do wish the seat would go a little lower, but even at its lowest setting, I have plenty of headroom. I can easily get in a comfortable position, be able to reach everything I need to reach, have a good view outside of the car, have everything adjusted where I need to be. This really is, I get in and I don't feel out of place in this car, which is really a good, perfect thing you need for a daily driver.
The seats, they are soft, but they're also not really supportive. The lack of lumbar adjustment and lumbar in general means that on longer drives, my back can kind of be like, ugh. So if you need lumbar, you're going to need to buy one of those pillows or mesh things you pop in the back of the seat. Also compared to the new Imprezas, my Impreza has better thigh support. These seats sit at much more of an angle than the new Imprezas, which are pretty flat and offer no support. And although it's not really at an aggressive angle, I really don't like aggressive angles for thigh support. So this does a really good job at that. The headrests also, they click in 4 different positions, which allow for even more variability in your comfort. And although these seats are kind of lacking for support and comfort on really long drives, they are way better than other Subaru seats I've had, and there really isn't too much to complain about. All in all, this really is a perfect driving position for daily driver. Another nice thing about Subaru is, unless you have a base model, you're probably going to have heated seats. And this car is no exception. You have 2, high and low. Although, they're in the worst possible place for them to be. Right here. It's completely unergonomic where they chose to put them, and it would make way more sense to put them here. And instead, you kind of have to cross your arm as you're driving, because it's weird to bend this way. But heated seats are heated seats. And plus, it's kind of fun to play a prank on your passenger. Throw the heated seat on and watch him or her try to find the button and turn it off. Yeah, that's pretty fun. The gauges are pretty simple red numbers on white dials to really create the illusion of a sporty feel. Nothing really else going on here. Although I do wish that the speedometer had more resolution, because let's be honest, 150 miles an hour in this car is very optimistic to say the least. Also to note, down there underneath the speedometer is an MPG gauge, which I hate those things. They're really annoying. All it really does is says, oh, the more gas you push on the pedal, the less fuel efficient you are. That's common sense. So I changed that to a fun gauge, which is pretty much the inverse of an MPG gauge, but I like it more. Also up here, you have other information, including MPG gauge, miles to empty, clock, and temperature, which is all controlled by this button here in the cluster, which really could be better placed. On to infotainment. And this came in a time where Subaru was awful with infotainment. Mine just had a standard dot matrix display with some buttons and dials. And although some people like that, the sound quality out of that was terrible. And the Bluetooth would often be impossible to connect. And it was just a bad experience. And in 2015, when they refreshed it, it was even worse when they put a screen in, because that was laggy and slow and didn't give you any benefit to having a screen because it didn't have any information on it. So I had this aftermarket unit put in, which has Android Auto, which is the main reason I got it. And it's drastically improved the quality of the sound coming out of it, as well as what the car can do. And nowadays, Imprezas and Subarus in general have a much better infotainment. In fact, honestly, it's some of the best in class infotainment. But if you're looking at this generation of Impreza, you're really going to want to update that infotainment, because otherwise, it's going to suck. As for storage, it's actually not too bad. You got a pretty large glove box. You got 2 cup holders here, 1 on each door as well. You have this large area, which actually doesn't really do as much as it should, because there's not a large lip on there and stuff will really fall out. So it'd be nice if they had a shelf there. You have a phone holder, or what you can seem to be a phone holder, but I don't use it as a phone holder mainly because it gets in the way of when I shift. The console, you have a terrain here, and rather decent size in there. The storage up front, it's pretty average in this class. Unfortunately, you don't have any sunglass holder. It's annoying, but it is what it is. One cool quirk about Subarus is if you have the rear wiper on intermittent, as it is now, and then put the car into reverse, it will automatically turn all the way on. Not a reverse, it'll just go right back to intermittent. It's kind of a cool feature. As for the back seat, it's actually pretty good back here. You got plenty of room. I can fit behind myself, even being 6'2". You got a cup holder in each door, no armrest, no vents. You got a map pocket behind the passenger seat. Pretty much nothing going on back here, but it is pretty comfortable. And I've done multiple long trips in this car with multiple people in the back seat, and it's always worked out great, with one exception. This center seat here. If you're going on a short trip, it's fine. 5 people can fit in this car perfectly fine. But if you go on anything with multiple hours in it, this center rear seat will make someone's ass numb. And it has happened on multiple occasions in this car. When I drove to Algonquin, so that's a 7-hour drive with 5 people in this car, you actually had to take a sleeping pad and lay it across the seat to stop the person's ass from going numb. So, you really don't want the center seat. Other than that, pretty decent back seat. As for cargo space, this car will hold 22.5 cubic feet with the seats up and 52.4 cubic feet with the seat down. And those numbers are actually pretty good for the class, especially when you consider this car is all-wheel drive. You look at a new Mazda 3 and that trunk is way smaller than it should be. Like I said before, I've gone on multiple weekend trips with 4 people in this car, and there has been no issue with space, as long as you don't pack 2 over the top. As for underfloor storage, there really isn't any. However, there is room by the spare tire, and I have multiple things crammed around the spare tire. There's no real other storage areas in here. There's no side pockets. Got a cargo net. And there's a couple of tie-down loops and this cargo cover. But this cargo area isn't really full of features. Just the only feature is that it's pretty wide and can easily fit a lot of things. And it wouldn't be a Subaru video if we didn't talk about all-wheel drive. And nowadays you can't really talk about all-wheel drive without talking about traction control and stability control. Partially because they're mandated on all cars, but also because they're kind of ingrained in a lot of all-wheel drive systems these days. Subaru's system, though, is honestly good enough on its own that you don't really need traction control and stability control in most cases. And when you do have traction and stability control, it cuts the power to the engine, and it really makes getting around more difficult, in my opinion. As you can see here, I have traction control off, but stability control on, because you can't completely turn stability control off. And I'm struggling to do donuts. And, normally, that's fine. Normally you want the security of stability control. But there are cases when it's really too much. Luckily, though, there is a workaround to it. So, traction control in this car, you can turn it off, but stability control is still very intrusive and won't really allow you to have any fun. Although there is a trick to turn it all off. This fuse right here, so this brown fuse, which is the last one on the manuals, but the second last one on automatics, you just pop that out, put it to the side, and when you turn the car back on, ABS, traction control, and stability control will all be off. So keep in mind, if you lock your wheels, your engine will stall, but it will create some more fun. So after that fuse is removed, you're going to start the car, wait for it to cycle, hold the brake for a few seconds, and there you go. You have the 3 lights turn on, and that means everything's off. So here I am driving the car after stability control and traction control have been fully disabled, and it makes a huge difference. The car is far easier to control and way more fun to drive. A lot of that is due to the fact that Subaru's all-wheel drive system is, good on its own, but it's mainly due to the fact that you're not fighting the car. When you have stability control and traction control constantly invading your driving, it makes driving very aggravating. And I understand the need for it because a lot of people can't really handle a sliding car, and I'm not claiming to be a pro rally driver or anything, but you should be able to fully disable stuff because in truth it makes driving easier. All right, just give it a go. I'll do a couple quick donuts because the world is flat. Like, as ironic as it is so much more controllable without traction and stability control. It's also important to note that on the automatics, I've heard you can't keep the fuse out for too long before the transmission may overheat. I don't have that issue on the manual, but I figured that was worth mentioning. Okay, so obviously, doing a road test in this car in the middle of a snowstorm, there's going to be some things I can't do. I'm not going to take it on the highway. I'm not gonna try going cruising at 65 and see what it's like. Because mainly I can tell you what it's like. I have driven this car 55,000 miles all across the Northeast, and there is nothing this car does that surprises me anymore. So let's talk about the highway first, while it's fresh on the mind. On the highway, this car it's not bad. It definitely is noisier than you wish, specifically when it comes to road and engine noise. This car needs a 6th gear, simply put. And in 5th gear at 72 miles an hour, which is when I cruise, which is where I usually set the cruise control at, it's at 3,000 RPM. And that's why I set the cruise control at that, because I like that nice round number of 3,000 RPM. And you can hear it. You can hear the engine all the time. You also have to turn the radio up as the speed increases, because road noise really comes in more. But with that being said, can't really expect that much more out of the compact class. This is 2014, and back then NVH was just kind of second thought. Not as bad as my Scion, of course, both gearing and NVH levels, but could be better. So you couple that with the kind of lack of support of the seats on long trips, and it can get a bit tiring to drive. Nothing really too tiring, but more fatiguing than it should be. Also annoying is the lack of passing power. So you're in 5th gear, you kind of need to downshift to 4th or even 3rd to pass. It's like I was saying before, this is the reason you buy a Subaru, this kind of weather. And I am so, I don't know if content's the right word, but so calm while driving this car in this kind of weather. Would be even more so if there was snow tires. This gives you confidence, having a Subaru. Acceleration. So I did mention when I was talking about the engine is acceleration is pretty slow. You really got to bring out the engine to get any power out of it. And when you ring it out, it doesn't sound happy. It's not like a Honda where it's like, yeah, rev me out, this is fun. It sounds like you're torturing the engine. And obviously you're not torturing your engine, but it doesn't sound nearly as happy as it should. You don't really get any excitement out of revving the engine, even though that's what you need to do to actually get power to it. Another issue with the power delivery is electronic throttle input. The throttle body doesn't open as much as you really want it to. And I suppose that's, to help prevent the engine from pre-ignition knock or what it needs to, but it really makes the responsiveness of the engine a lot more known to drive. And that's where Subaru's biggest weakness is these days. It's one of the reasons why they don't appeal to me as much anymore. And also because they're not quirky anymore. They're mainstream, and they sell a lot of cars for that reason. But also because the powertrains really, there's nothing going on there. It's not exciting. I used to think for the longest time this car had hydraulic steering. Until I was like, let me see, check the fluid, and realized it didn't have a reservoir. And then I checked online, I actually did have electric steering. So, in that case, fooled me. Electric steering doesn't really give you the responsiveness. It's heavier than most electric power steering setups, or at least the early ones especially, which is what fooled me into thinking it was hydraulic. It's got enough weight to it that it's not like, it doesn't feel like you're moving a feather as you're turning. But at the same time, there really isn't a whole lot of feedback. And when you drive this thing spiritedly on roads, you feel good, you feel confident, but then you don't really feel like pushing at the same time, because although there's confidence at 6/10, 7/10, when you really think about pushing it, you don't get the feedback you want, and you start to second guess yourself. And you are planted, but it doesn't really give you the confidence when you're going for more. It would really help if the steering was a bit sharper and a bit quicker, and that I think would give you the confidence to push it more. But as of right now, it doesn't really do that. All right, transmission. I know I've noted this before, but it doesn't need a 6th gear for just NVH levels and fuel efficiency reasons. A 6th gear would be very helpful. And in the Crosstreks, they put a 6th gear in, but not, at least the new Crosstreks, but not in the Imprezas, which really shows me that Subaru is going to tune out the manual. And they've said it before, they are unwilling to make it work with the eyesight system, even though you have Honda and Mazda and Volkswagen. They're all willing to make their collision avoidance and adaptive cruise control work with manuals. Subaru just isn't, which is really disappointing. But as for actual gearing, gearing's pretty well spaced. Personally, I feel like 2nd gear can be a little shorter, but overall, I like the gearing in this car. It just, the main problem, like I said before, is the power. The gearing's good, but it needs more power to make the best use of that gearing. As for the actual shifting, this is not a cable-operated shifter. Unlike the 6-speeds, the 5-speeds are directly linked into the transmission, as far as I know. So you do get way more of a mechanical notchy feel, and there's more resistance in that case. And I used to really not like it as much. I used to be like, I much prefer the cable shifter. And in truth, I do. I do still prefer the cable shifter, and I like the 6-speed feel way more than I like the 5-speed feel on Subarus. But I have grown to like this 5-speed feel more. So there you go. 2nd gear floored, no traction control, but it's not sending power to the engine. Just talking about that electronic throttle. Oh yeah, and it's a bit notchy, and you can't rush it. You have to just guide it in and guide it in as fast as it will. Because if you try pounding gears, it won't go. It just won't go. Overall, it's nice to have this kind of shifter around. The clutch, on the other hand, the clutch is still one of the most difficult clutches I've ever used. It was my first time really driving manual, and I thought, oh my God, all cars are this tough to drive, and it took me a while to get it smooth. And then I stepped into some other manuals, like, whoa, this isn't like my car at all. This is easier. This is, it gives you more feel. And it's true. This car, the clutch is like an on-off switch. It is not a beginner manual car. It is way more difficult to get smooth and to really get right. 2nd gear really is the gear you need to be in. And if you're in the wrong gear, you'll feel the lack of power, especially when you're going up hills or if the car is full. Ride is kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none type thing. It rides soft enough to be comfortable. And it's kind of firm enough to not really wallow in the corners, but it doesn't really excel at either. But it's a good compromise for what it is. As for reliability, this car has 73,232 miles on it. And I have never had, knock on wood, there's no wood in this car, never had a reliability issue. One time when I was driving, the airbag light came on. Might turn it off, turn it back on again, the airbag light was off. The clutch is kind of squeaky these days. I've tried greasing it, doesn't seem to do much. But there's really my only complaints reliability-wise. Not that those are even complaints. The squeaky clutch is more of an annoyance than actually is a problem. And now we get to the feeling I get while driving this. And simply put, it's not a strong feeling, one way or the other. This is just like every other compact car these days. Unless you really need all-wheel drive, there are better cars to buy. When I replace this, it will probably be with a Civic Si, either this generation or next generation. We'll see. Maybe if I'm really lucky, Corolla GR. That'd be fun. But this doesn't really bring me excitement. I don't look forward to driving this car. Even in snow like this is a very competent cruiser. It gives you enough confidence to not worry about if you're going to make it, because it's always made it for me. It's never given me any problem. But because of that, it doesn't stand out in any respect either. If you need a car, and you really need a car for snow, if you really need a car with all-wheel drive for snow, there really aren't many other options.
So how does the Impreza compare? Specifically the 2014 Impreza. Well, if you really need all-wheel drive, this thing is great. But if you're really just looking for a compact car, a daily driver, something that's, you know, will get you from A to B, a bit of sportiness and some good efficiency, there are better options. If I had the chance to do this again, if I had a chance to go back to 2017 and get a different manual car, I probably would. I probably wouldn't go for the Impreza. If I really wanted a Subaru, I would go for a 2000s Impreza or my old Outback with manual. But nowadays, Subaru is too mainstream for me. But I'm not the average buyer. And for lots of people, mainstream is perfect for them. My next car, it will be something sportier than this. But I don't regret owning this. It's been a car that's always gotten me where I needed to go. Whether it be in snow or off-road or on asphalt across the state. This car is pretty average, and it's kind of just fallen behind in its class. But it still has its niche for a reason. And there's still a reason they sell so many of these. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go drive this car for what it's best meant to do. Get me home during a snowstorm.